Hello, everybody. First off, thank you, Danielle and Women's Visionary Congress for inviting me. This is my first non-cannabis speech, I feel like. I usually have something, I'm talking about cannabis for some reason, so I hope this different topic goes well. I'll just start off and just say it was really, I had a difficult time really landing on what I was going to speak on today, as I feel like I'm not I definitely feel like I'm a part of the psychedelic community and the ways of having used psychedelics. But I think there's more to community, and there's more that signals that brings people together. That would be the definition of community, besides the usage of a psychedelic. And with that framework, I don't feel a part of the psychedelic community. And I was wondering, what would I actually say? Or, what would I talk on? And in the end, I decided to land on my experiences that I have learned in the course of working in the cannabis industry, and lessons learned from that, and what I think I could provide as insight to what information could be helpful for this community. And I know that the people who fought for cannabis and psychedelic community in many ways are overlapped. In fact, the organization that the youth mentor that spoke before me came from SSDP. That organization is a huge pipeline of talent recruitment within the cannabis industry, and many leaders of organizations are currently were former organizers of that organization. And so I imagine that SSDP will be the pipeline for this community as well, as things get moving and chugging along, or there might be a creation of some other organization. So that was the background of us thinking about, what am I going to talk about? It's the relationship between what's happened over there with the cannabis movement to what we can look at what's going to be moving forward with the psychedelic community. I'm going to write a note down real fast. Okay, so I'll back up. My name's Lanese Martin. Nice to meet you all. I was born and raised in New York. Really, I love those roots. Decided that about 2 months after turning 18, I came out to the Bay Area. Lived in North Bay for a while. Did an undergrad and then grad program at Dominican University of California out in San Rafael. While I was working on the MBA, I moved to Oakland. And it was during the Occupy movement, and there was a lot I didn't know about, and just getting off work at the time, it was pretty much like a social scene. It was like, what are you doing after work? Meet you at Occupy, and so we would, I don't know, like that was my introduction to activism, just like hanging out, drinking on the steps of City Hall. Talking about anti-capitalism stuff, and through that, that came and went, but my commitment and interest to that stayed, and so I got involved with some local organizations. I interned at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and through that internship, I was able to get a position at Oakland Rising, which is a local collaborative organization of issue-based organizations that have been around in the Bay Area for decades and such. And what they did is they came together, so it was issue-based, I was want to say. So issue-based is something similar to the psychedelics that you have going on. You want to decriminalize, that's an issue. Maybe you have a campaign to decriminalize, that's an issue-based campaign. So there were a lot of issue-based organizations, but they knew that their collective goals were wrapped up in each other's. And so they decided to collaborate together to create an electoral organization so that they can harness their power and not just work on independent issue-based campaigns, but harness that power year-round, especially in non-election years, to do something greater than issue-based campaign, which is movement building. And so that was kind of the work that I did. And while I was doing that work, I had the opportunity to hang out with some cool folks who I went to school with. And like I said, my school was in Marin, North Bay. So I was doing a green MBA program, one of the first in the country. And so naturally, I went to school with some folks who liked some psychedelics, who liked some cannabis. And during that time I was going to school, folks were thinking about starting their businesses or talking about, they're referring to themselves as entrepreneurs. And that was the same time that I was running campaigns in the flatlands of Oakland, West and East Oakland, North Oakland, hiring folks from Black and brown communities to talk to their neighbors of Black and brown communities about issues that were facing them. And I would hire sometimes upwards teams of 100. And I knew that these folks, like this was one of their only earned income jobs throughout the year. I knew what they were doing the rest of the year. Campaigns are like 3 to 8 weeks at a time. Their only earned income for the year. So a lot of them were hustling, and whatever that meant for them. But some of them that were hustling, and that a part of their hustle includes cannabis, I noticed that they weren't really, they weren't referring to themselves as entrepreneurs. And when I would have one-to-ones with them, which is basically a normal conversation, but unbeknownst to the other person, I have goals that I'm trying to move through that conversation. And so when I'm having, and the goal of these conversations that I was having with the folks that I was working with is for them to see their value and potential and actually realization of themselves as not criminals. Because they didn't get the confidence or the mainstream is telling them. Them making vape pens of DMT or mushrooms, brownies, or selling this weed, that's not entrepreneurial to them because the media has told them that they're criminals. So when I start talking to them about being business owners, they can't, they're like, there's a space between them. But I could talk easily to white folks. They understand that they're entrepreneurs. And so that was an issue that I wanted to work on. And so when I got to the cannabis space, it was because I felt like there was a gap, that there wasn't enough attention to the Black and brown communities. And the white folks had been there for a while. There was organizations that I got told to go talk to. And it's not that those organizations and their leadership were bad or had any ill intent. It's just that they had the goals and they were trying to move what they were going to move. And the intersectionality is an afterthought. And it's something that they're actually going to be able to move yourself. And so basically, as I got into the cannabis industry, I just want to say, I remembered that I was coming from a place of being skill-based and trained, understanding that there's a space between activism, leadership, and organizing, and that what I got met with in the cannabis industry was a lot of unprofessional, passionate people. And I would say that that's the major takeaway, and that's going to be the basis of my conversation today, which is passion alone and being right alone will not win the campaign, and it definitely won't lead to movement building. So that's the talk. Where am I at in time? But where am I at? 5, 10? I'd just like to know. I should probably start my own clock. My bad. Oh, I have it on my phone. Oh, okay. Oh, it's only 12. Okay, good. We're good. Okay. So I wrote down some notes, so I'm gonna hop into them. That was my intro. All right, so I'll again say here, passion without skill, no good. It didn't just happen, and this is before digital access and internet. It didn't just happen that people just knew to get on some buses and go to the same location, and they knew which people to talk to. What I'm talking about is more of the civil rights era style of movement. I think that took organizing. It wasn't just a bunch of lone wolf that called themselves activists. It wasn't a bunch of borderline sociopath, charismatic leaders that are able to get folks to, blindly follow them because the discipline of self-empowerment is harder than to blindly follow a sociopathic, charismatic leader. So again, there's organizing, and again, that takes skill. And so I had no idea what this was. I remember when I got to Oakland and I met my first couple of people, and they were like, I'm an organizer. It was like, I had a job before at the Corte Madeira's, the container store, and so they said that we were organizers. So, like for about my first 3 months living in Oakland, I thought everyone was working at the container store I had never seen. But there are like camps in the woods of like the Tennessee and North Carolina and Oakland. There's training camps here and our special places. Like there is a whole, is it art and science? Is it art and science? And the science is important. The science is, I guess they say the rubber meets the road. And so I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the science. So again, I reached on the activist versus leader versus organizer. I think our goal should be to learn the skill set of being organizers within your community. And again, that's collective power, not individually being one-off and it being important about your story, but understanding that your story isn't important and understanding the parts of your story that are collective to everyone else's story and that can actually cross over social constructs to build some coalitions, which is important because, how do I put it? There are not enough of you to vote something into existence on your own. It's just mathematically, that's not how voting works. You don't have the numbers. So again, it's the art and the science. Well, if you don't have the numbers, how do you get the numbers? What is your strategy? Your strategy can be to use the common lip service of diversity and inclusion. And when that surface level, understanding, I need to go out and get the enough bodies to be able to deliver the vote to win the campaign. When a surface level like that, you find, what do I call stalled campaigns and not embrattled, it's not a word. Campaigns that are, they have beef, they have internal beef, meaning that there's too much conflict. And this conflict is good, so I'm saying there's too much unhealthy conflict. When diversity and inclusion isn't understood to be the center and the only way to winning, but as addressing. And so, I would say again, if I was going to say what are the three biggest things of the art and science that I had identified through my work in organizing, I would say it's a broad coalition building, which I get back to, political acumen, and procedural understanding. So that would be the three things I would say: procedural understanding, political acumen, and broad coalition building. In my opinion, the two of them you can buy. You don't have to, and the political acumen, you can go buy that. The people have resumes, and you can see, what jurisdictions, it can be proven through their resume, campaign wins, campaign losses, relationships, their network. You can look on their Facebook, you can look on their LinkedIn. Who does this person know inside of the walls of the building that I need to know? Do they know influencers? Do they know that network? Do they know the decision makers? Do they know the process? And then again, it doesn't matter to be right, you have to win. Being right is, like we all agree, plants is medicine. Yeah, that's right, good job, great. But are you gonna win? So we have to get to that part. And winning, and I will say my own experience this year, I was like, man, we need job training in the cannabis industry. And I keep going up to city council meetings. That was a lack of procedural understanding. City council don't implement programs, right? So over there, you could have just wasted how many of time I did waste. I'm not gonna share with y'all, I'm embarrassed. But that's the Oakland Workforce Development Board, the understanding of procedural. And then who does on the board answer to in the staff relationship? That can be bought, political acumen can be bought, that's just a resume. Now let's focus on the coalition building. So I'll say the cannabis industry, they were able to go out and buy political acumen, and they were able to buy procedural understanding. And you could look at that as Exhibit A and Exhibit B of Roger Stone and John Boyner joining the boards. You can go buy that. Political acumen, access to relationships, you could do that, right? What you can't buy is genuineness. Broad coalition building. And that's, like I said, back to the science, back to math, there's not enough of you to vote decriminalizing nature into existence. And so how long will it take? I guess the question is, how fast, how long will it take for you to actually build effective coalitions that can move your campaign forward, move the movement forward? And so what I'm going to move into now is some unrequested assessments of the group that I've seen as a whole. Let's make sure I get to everything in the right order. It all lays on each other, so I'm just trying to make sure I get. Okay. Accept that. Did that. So. All right. Oh, assessments. I will start off on a personal level here. I'll get back to myself. As a black person, born into whatever I was born into, but part of my life biography is from former foster care of New York State. There were, there was pretty much some I'll say it this way: it's really weird being 6 years old and being able to watch the news or read a newspaper and be and read that, and already understand that the statistic for my life was that I would probably be pregnant by middle school or high school, definitely won't make it to college, and will probably continue to have a retail job for the rest of my life. It's an interesting thing, and I'm going to have an overgeneralization and say that I'm sure a good portion of folks in this room and of the psychedelic community might not have had that messaging and understanding of what their life trajectory was going to be, just based off what they were born into. And so with that positioning and me being a fighter and me having really great ambition, I chose to not be a statistic as much as I could individually affect change on a systemic issue. And a part of what that allotment for me is making sure that I was safe, that I communicated to folks of other races, mainly white, but again, other people of color like to join the bandwagon of anti-blackness. So I had to communicate to other races that I was safe, that I was super smart, that I'm friendly, and I'm cool to be with. And so that, for a black person, involves a lot of respectability politics. If you look at my outfit, it's pretty safe. Got on some solid pants, a solid shirt, nothing's too baggy, it's on the hips, shoes okay, This was thought out from a lifetime of shaping and conditioning from social programs, conditions. And this outfit was meant to de-arm. This outfit was meant to convey trust to some people. Hey, I'm okay. That's nonverbal communication. It's a nonverbal communication that I'm giving out there. And all people give nonverbal communication when they get dressed in the morning to identify who they belong to, what they like, what they don't like. And what I find, again, I'm going to say from personal, but what I find and what I find myself making eye contact in the room with other folks that identify as black when I enter into other spaces is other folks' lack of awareness of nonverbal communication. And so when I enter into certain spaces, especially the psychedelic space, and I'm looking at the nonverbal communication of the outfit that people chose to wear to communicate who they identify as, the community they identify, what I see somatically, which means in my body, it gives me a reaction that's a little bit worse than when I see a Confederate flag. When I see a Confederate flag, it's safe. I'm very aware that that person has chosen that they have positional power over me. They think, at least they think they do, over their skin color, and they're happy with communicating that, and that's safe. That's one of the things I loved about New York. You know, so many of us living together separately, and it was safe. I got out to the Bay Area, and there were so many people living separately together. That feels unsafe. And so what the outfit of many different colors, flowy garbs, appropriation of what seems to be other people's cultural garbing, that says to me that I'm in an unsafer position than someone with a Confederate flag, because this person is putting their privilege on fleek. They feel comfortable enough signaling to police, hey, I probably have all sorts of drugs on me right now. And I probably enjoy group sex, which there's nothing wrong with either of those things. But it's literally your nonverbal communication that you feel so strong to wear. And I'm in my skin, wearing these clothes to tell you, hey, nothing's over, no show to see here, folks. And so the situation is the choice of the clothes that we get to adorn our bodies with is that there's some type of communication that's going on from the community to black and brown folks who just feel a little bit not welcomed in, which is, this is unsafe. My black body cannot be next to your privilege on fleek because I'm at risk. I can't signal I do drugs. And it also seems when we communicate with each other, I know as a black person, and I talk to my brown friends, the plants, and we talk about the ancestral history. It's supposed to be rooted in healing and ceremonious, and I know some folks in this space really respect that. But again, from not fully being in the community and just seeing what I see that there's two P's of this, three P's of the psychedelic communities. It's P's, I would say. And I say, like, a lot of folks try and move with the idea of being politics, but it's actually pleasure in politics. And pleasure is first. And that's very apparent to folks that are not in the community. It's pleasure first. I like to do drugs. I like to get high. Oh, but it's natural. It's not bad. And also, by the way, no drugs should be bad. And then also, I like to be free and express myself. Pleasure. But it's pleasure first from my outside of the community that leads a lot of folks to engage. And politics second, as a way to try and absolute yourself from whatever conditioning you think you have to absolute yourself from. And so when you start engaging other communities, especially the communities whose plants you're appropriating from, and what you're wearing on your body is, hey, I like to have a good time and do drugs because I like to get high, which is cool. I do drugs, like I said. I'm a part of the community as far as it goes as having ingested substances that are both legal and illegal. Part of the community in that way. But again, we're going back to that thing of trust and broad coalition building and genuineness and crossing over. And so when you realize that you don't have the math and you need to go talk to other people, what is your nonverbal communication flagging? Is it flagging an actual respect for the plant? Is it flagging an actual respect for the ceremony? Is it flagging an actual respect for the black experience under the drug war, or the brown experience, which is also very interesting, and needs folks to understand 25% of deportations are for drug-related situations? Like, you know, how are you strategizing to get that coalition? And I'm thinking back to a model. I remember there was the Young Lords, there was the Black Panthers, there was the Yellow Berets, and everyone understood that they needed to go back to their people. So the Puerto Ricans had their leadership and they organized their Puerto Ricans. The Black people had their leadership and they organized the Black people. And Asians had their people and they organized each other. And but the leadership of those organizations, they talked to each other and they organized together because they knew that their struggles were collectively held up. And they also knew that their leaders had been through enough training and get skill, science. It's not just fun and passion and I want to do this, but it's a discipline. And they know that their leaders actually went through the discipline to go through training programs to have the ability to communicate with each other across the racial differences that their people were experiencing on the floor, at the ground level, that created a lot of the tension. And then so what happened, the leadership, talked off, and everyone went back to their groups. What y'all are trying to do is skip this, I'm sorry, that was too extra assessment. What I find, or what I saw in the cannabis industry, and I want y'all to skip that, is trying to skip the part of building the science, the skill, and leadership development, and also trying to skip the part where everyone is equipped to handle their own communities. I find folks are trying to be where they don't belong. You belong in the conversation. You belong in the fight. You don't belong in my neighborhood. Me and you can talk when we're organizing, and I actually feel safe with you because you have signaled to me that you are safe. And that's coalition building. And we make collective groups, collective decisions, collective goals, collective strategy. But you can't skip the actual work of building up that. You can't skip the actual building the infrastructure for defining. If this was a political campaign, I'll look at the field and I need to identify, how many constituents are in each place, which ones vote the other way. I'll look for what are my low-hanging fruit, districts that, were like this 2% off last election or that, voted on it last election. Probably don't need to focus on them. Like, what is your power map analysis? Who have you decided needs to be at the table? And then what are you doing differently to get them at the table? Because it's not going to be doubling down. And so to not just be like, okay, you got some work to do and, not provide any solutions or opportunities to go get that discipline I speak of or that organizing that I speak of. Okay, where we're at is, I would suggest there's two different organizations that I think does great work around white people organizing white people. That's going to be my next nonprofit I found. I'll be the ED of White People Organizing White People. It's called WOW. But until I get WOW off the ground, you can go to SURGE, which is Showing Up for Racial Justice. They have an Oakland and our Berkeley, they have a Bay Area chapter, SURJ, S-U-R-J, Showing Up for Racial Justice. They can help you get the 101s of organizing, they can help you get the basics. Don't try and come to a seasoned, organizer from, as that would be a peer, without having, it's like you wouldn't try to go to calculus without doing pre-calculus. So you have some homework to do before you come sit at the table with me. And if you don't do that homework, I obviously can't trust you because I know you're not serious. So Showing Up for Racial Justice is one organization, and another organization is the Catalyst Project. So these are two great organizations, local-based. I know that people came from around the country, but I'm sure that if you looked at those two organizations and say, hey, I'm based here, they probably know where their friends are. And also SURGE is a national organization, and they have chapters based all over the country. So again, passion without skill is no good. We need it's art and science to win in a campaign, broad coalition building, political acumen, and procedural understanding. Like y'all can buy political acumen, y'all can buy procedural understanding. There's a lot of work to be done on the ability to build an effective and genuine coalition. And I suggest that a place to start to be able to get to that place of getting to a table would be Surge or the Catalyst Project. And thank you, Danielle, for the opportunity, and thank you all for listening.
Take a few questions. Just make sure that if you ask a question, you're asking from the mic that we're holding. I think it's on. Okay, I saw Ori. Okay.
What's your Cash App and Venmo, please?
That was my question yesterday to somebody. Okay.
But can you do it slowly so people can write it down?
Oh, okay. I don't. My Venmo is like my name. It's my name. I don't think I have Cash App. Yeah, but it's my name. Thank you, babe.
Okay, that's hella funny because I was gonna ask you for your Venmo, but I also have another question. Yes.
At Lanese, Lanese -Martin.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, first off, thank you for your reflections on the group's like greater self-awareness, or like things we could do to be more self-aware as a group. And I guess I'm just asking like what, as someone who identifies as kind of like an outsider to this group, and that those reflections that you bring, like what are suggestions that you have to bring more Black and brown communities within this psychedelic movement?
I don't have my own suggestions. Ife broke it down real clearly yesterday. I back up everything Ife said. They are doing the work, and I suggest that if folks really, support Ife.
Anybody? Okay. You want to miss? Oh.
Learning from the cannabis equity movement and what we know now in terms of like we have this system of capitalism trying to build in this structure, the failings of cannabis equity, and then the things that maybe did work in certain places. What can the psychedelics community learn as it moves forward with specific substances, and how can we make sure that there's equity tied in, or at least where can we go to look for good information?
Is your question, what sites or articles could folks read that's about the cannabis industry that could provide insightfulness for what's coming down the road for psychedelics?
Yeah, like at the precipice of okay, now psychedelics are legalized and now we're monetizing them and people are selling them. How are we tying in equity into those conversations? And how, since cannabis equity, this is where kind of like the microcosm that I feel like we have to study to learn from. Like, what are your suggestions? Where should we go to look?
I don't know. So I don't know. So when I transferred over from political organizing to thinking about cannabis as an issue, some organizations that folks told me about was NORML, Drug Policy Alliance, and SSDP. And those were pretty mainstream. So I scored a lot of their, or scoured, whatever. I went through a lot of their websites. A lot of them have like attachments, links, reports, data facts. And so that was a lot of like the initial information. I mean, since then, there's a lot more that's been produced, I'm sure. But so I don't know. I don't have a direct answer to that. I said that's how when I needed to like get in and just like, read and understand what happened in California from pre-1996 and then post-1996. Those are the organizations' websites that I was on a lot, and the leaders of organizations that I was reaching out to, and I reached out to Ellen up there from California Normal. I definitely got my one-to-one, and he did multiple one-to-ones in the beginning because I was like, Elder, I need to know what's been happening. You were here. What happened? And I did that for about a year, different folks from different organizations, and was able to get enough to put together the hypothesis what the Incubator would become. But what I would say is is there a need to monetize this plant? Like, avoid regulation and taxation by all means. That's my lesson learned.
Hey, so I wanted to get your take. I heard your message loud and clear that it was like, organize your community first, and then we can talk as a coalition. So in organizing an anti-capitalist movement recently here, I had a really hard time with the organization because it was always focused on, to my mind, a very privileged community that wasn't necessarily the people on the front lines of what we were fighting for. And I wanted to get your take. Like, I was like, let's have block parties. Let's meet our neighbors. Let's actually talk to each other and make connections in where we live. And that would encompass actually quite a diverse array of people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, or whatever. And I was wondering if you were saying that maybe we should actually just talk to people that party like us and look like us.
Unpopular fact, integration was the downfall. So, yes. I think, like I said, the model that I just talked about with the, and I can get a more recent, study, but like the Young Lords, Yellow Berets, Black Panthers, the leaders of those organizations, again, being rooted in a discipline of understanding organizing, understanding themselves, understanding communications across racial barriers, doing the extra work that it takes to be a leader. Not, I'm talking about the sociopath, the charismatic person. I'm talking about a leader. And so doing that work, it's key. And I would give an example of a recent case study, the National Domestic Worker Alliance, domestic workers in New York City, wanted to have some rights. And at the end of the day, if you got all the domestic workers together that you could organize, this wouldn't be enough math. There wouldn't be enough science to get the votes to pass something that was right. We all knew it was right. Domestic workers, pay them. But at the end of the day, it took the leadership of the folks that were organizing domestic workers to be able to reach out to the leadership of white people, and the white people who were raised by domestic workers. It wasn't domestic workers going to talk to white executives. It wasn't white executives talking to domestic workers. It was domestic workers talking to domestic workers about what they thought was human rights. And then it was white people talking to white people about, hey, is this how we want to be? Also, remember that lady who raised you? Like, she didn't get sick days. Do you want the kid that takes care of you to not get sick days? It was white to white, black to black. Leadership held the conversation, held the ability to make sure that the goals for both communities were aligned. That's the discipline in science. It's not just, I want something, I'm right. So how are you going to win? And if you understand the social construct that that we are existing in, then you don't have an ego. And that's the problem with a lot of these organizers. They watch too much Dangerous Minds. They about to come up in here talking about, oh, I'm gonna help. Nah. You go talk to your cousins. I'll talk to my cousins. Thank you.